don't know what the journey is going to be like, and you don't know how it's going to play out. Just a big believer in just being consistent with everything that you do, and giving it all you have, and the journey will write itself.
Well, I'm very excited to do this, so thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, it's great to chat. Been a big fan and reading all your books throughout my career.
No way. Do you remember how you heard about them?
I don't know if it was probably just through Instagram, probably. Just started following you. Friend of mine who I used to play with, we always kind of bounce different books off of one another. And yeah, I think The Obstacle's the Way was probably one of my first initial books to read. And yeah, just been taking some notes from all of them, and it's been really helpful for me.
That's very cool for me to hear. Certainly not what I expected when I was writing about ancient philosophy. That Olympic soccer, let's say, would be a viable audience. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's all relatable for sure.
What else did you like to read as a player? What books have been influential for you?
Um, Honestly, just a lot of like athletes and just successful people's stories. Any self-help book, I would always just try to get my hands on. And obviously, I got to throw in some other books that I'm not constantly turning my brain on for, but um, yeah, I think reading several of yours, they were just kind of easy, good reads for me to kind of pick up and put down for a little, pick back up again. And then at any particular moment throughout my career, I'd find myself like, wow, like I really needed to hear that message. So no, no particular books, just always just trying to get myself on, um, into books that have just been, people's stories and kind of what they went through in life.
It is weird. I think people assume that people who are very good at what they do and doing it at an elite level where they're getting paid a lot, where there's like huge audiences, that these people are just sort of intrinsically motivated, that they just sort of naturally have all the sort of mental skills that they need. It is both interesting and then I think actually kind of like reassuring to see that like people are just picking up the same books as everyone else, going like, I could use a little motivation, even though they have every reason to sort of, and have had all the training to just naturally be that way or to be that way at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of, we talk about certain books. I mean, Relentless was one book that just rang real true to me, and I think it's just a constant evolution of learning. Like we're going to learn till the day we die, and there's people who have the growth mindsets and the people who have the fixed mindsets, and I've always just been someone who wants to constantly grow and learn. And I don't have all the answers, nor do many other people. But if you can constantly fill yourself with positivity and stories of people failing and getting back up again, that is what resonates with me. So even the best of the best, continue to need self help and figure out areas in their life where they can learn, and that's the beauty of life.
Well, even there, you just sort of casually alluded to Carol Dweck, growth mindset, right? Or I guess it's called mindset, but the idea, like the first time I read that, and it was like, oh yeah, there's sort of people who believe that they're as good as they can be and they can't get any better, or they're as bad as they can be and they can't get any better. And then there's people who sort of relentlessly focus on where they can improve and how they can get better. You're probably naturally that way, or you wouldn't have gotten to even being good at, let's say, high school soccer. But when you learn that concept for the first time, even if it's only confirming sort of how you're inclined to be, it's weirdly, it unlocks something. Just like hearing getting a name for the concept unlocks something in a person, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you have to be open to failure too. I feel like I've always been someone just from a little girl. I can remember, trying to throw a spiral with a football, and I would try and fail at it, and then, the fifth try, maybe be able to get it. Um, and that's just kind of how I was wired. So I don't know. Yeah, is that something that you're kind of born with? Do you adapt to that? Is that your environment? Is that your circumstances? Like it is pretty interesting, but I've just never been afraid to fail and mess up. And that's the constant successful stories that you hear about people is they've failed over and over again. They've failed more times than they've succeeded. And it's a general theme. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, scientist, or, an athlete or an author. So it's interesting.
Going to obstacles then, and sort of the growth mindset. I was thinking about this as I was preparing. It's 20 years ago that you were cut from the under 21 team, and you've talked about this. Um, that's kind of amazing. But you thought that was it for you. Like you've talked about how you thought that was the end of the road. Um, Obviously, it wasn't. But talk to me about that moment where you're sort of like, is this as far as this thing takes me, or am I going to double down and figure out who I'm going to be and how I'm going to get past this?
I think that moment for me it was a pivotal moment in my career, in my life, and I kind of break up my life into two halves. The first half, being born and then up until this U21 point of getting cut. I was one player in person. I relied on my talent a lot. I had a lot of coaches who supported my talent. And even though one day I would show up and give 80%, it was still better than most people's 100%. And whether that was, right or wrong with some of the coaches that I had, they would constantly play me. They would constantly need me. I was the best player on every team I played on. And I never really kind of went through anything that was a little difficult or a little challenging or, hit an obstacle per se. And I was pretty lazy, in fact, and didn't have like the best workout ethic. Pointed the fingers, blamed a lot of people. There was never that, again, that growth mindset, that internal motivation to say, all right, I'm going to look myself in the mirror. What do I need to do to be better? It's not anybody else's fault. What do I need to do? So when I got cut from the under 21 national team, the easy way out for me was to quit. Of course, my parents didn't want to see that happen. They had, spent numerous weekends and hours and money, um, you know, giving me the opportunity to kind of lay this foundation. And they did know that I loved it. So I finally, figured out that I just had to face it. And I really believe that the only way through any challenge and obstacle in life is through it. And you become better when you just go through it. Exactly. I remember that from your book. And so I started to just change my mindset, started to work hard, started to work on a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily good at. I got myself fit. I hated running, but I just did it, and I knew that I had to do it, and have now grown to love running. It's therapeutic for me. It's my outlet. So it again that first half of my life, was pretty much relying on my talent up to that point, and like anything in life, talent only gets you so far. And so that second part of my life from the under 21 days, all the way until this point, um yeah, it's a tale of two different people, two different Carlys. And right now it's been about, digging deep, and I had the motivation, I had the passion, I just needed to learn the necessary tools to not only get me to the top, but allow me to stay there for so long. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey, but that was a pivotal moment in my career and my life.
Epictetus said that philosophy wasn't this dry, abstract thing. It was a thing, he said, you should be talking about, writing down, reading about, exploring with other people all the time. He said, constantly have it at hand. That's how I think about philosophy. And it's weird. For the last 5 years, every single day, I've been writing this free email about Stoic philosophy. It's been not just cool to meet all these fellow practitioners of Stoic philosophy, but in writing about it, talking about it, reading it for our podcast, I have got to internalize these ideas in a way that I never would have been able to under any other circumstances. That's the idea. Philosophy is something we're supposed to engage in, not keep in these dusty old books or read once and be done with. It's a constant process. And I think that's why the email has worked so well for the people reading about it and sharing it and talking about it, all of that as well. So I'd love to have you join us on this email. You can sign up at dailystoic.com/daily email. It's totally free, no spam. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I've basically given away a book for free every single year for 5 years, and I'm going to keep on doing it until I drop dead. Check it out, dailystoic.com/daily email. Yeah, there's a story about Roseanne Cash, Johnny Cash's daughter. I think I heard about it from Stephen Pressfield first, but it's in her memoir, which is really really good. But she was, sort of coasting. She's obviously naturally talented. Her father's like sort of music royalty, so she's just sort of doing her thing. And she'd put out a couple albums, and they'd done okay. And she has this dream one night, and dreams are like sort of weird. And she's in this dream and she's at this party and she sees the singer Linda Ronstadt talking to this man. And the man has like a name tag on and it says art, right? These sort of symbolizing like her craft, what she does. And she goes up to them. She's a huge Linda Ronstadt fan, and she tries to talk to her. And the man, Art, looks at her and he says, "We don't respect dilettantes." And then they both turn their back on her. And she sort of has this wake up call that like
Wow.
she's been doing okay, but she's been a bit of a dilettante. Like she wasn't all in on the thing. And then she ends up hiring better collaborators. She demands more of herself as a lyricist and as a musician. Hires teachers, etc. And I think about that moment. It's like, are you being serious about this thing, or are you just enjoying the fact that you're pretty good at it, or that you're getting rewards for it, or that it doesn't ask that much from you? Because life doesn't, ultimately the craft or the profession or the thing, it doesn't have much time for dilettantes. You're not going to get very far.
No, no, and you're not going to be handed it. And I think that was the biggest lesson is, I don't know that I necessarily even had the most belief in myself that I could do it. So maybe there was a sense of fear that crept in. What if I start running? What if I start working hard? And then what if I don't make it? But I committed to it from that point on. I was, like you said, I was all in, and just consistently living a lifestyle, throughout that journey of taking care of my body, getting enough sleep, eating well, training as much as I can, double, triple the amount of other players, and just committing to that. And you don't know what the journey is going to be like, and you don't know how it's going to play out, but just a big believer in just being consistent with everything that you do, and giving it all you have, and the journey will write itself.
Well, obviously in athletics, there's a sort of a legal distinction between amateur and professional, but it strikes me that that's the moment that you turn pro.
Yeah, it was almost, I think timing is everything in life. I think that there is the higher powers or whatever your beliefs are that, need to collide and need to kind of all come together. But the under 21 national team for me was the 4 years throughout my collegiate career at Rutgers University. And then in 2004, when I finished up, 2005 was when I first got into the national team. I had two camps. They were actually not as busy that year because they were going through some contractual stuff. So I had my first two games being played on the national team, and it was almost like, hey, you're rolling into this, and you better learn fast. and take this opportunity and figure out what you need to do to be able to stay there.
Yeah, and the idea of being a professional at what you do is sort of secondary or independent of whether you're getting paid for that thing or not, right? Like obviously being a pro athlete means like you're getting paid to be the athlete, but like um, there are plenty of people who are getting paid that are not professionals. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't treat it like a job or a calling or a craft. They are they are continuing maybe because maybe they had different assets or whatever. They don't run into that thing that you happen to bump into there early on, which is like, hey, my natural talent isn't enough anymore. There has to be some other driver or system that it's going to allow me to continue doing this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because you reach a point where you're being funneled into a bucket of all the best players. Like everybody that I was playing with were the same me, just in a different state, in a different section of the country. So there's got to be some sort of separation of what's going to keep you there and what's going to allow you to keep staying, at the top. And um, I think it ultimately starts with passion. I mean, that for me is a non-negotiable. If you don't have any passion and love for what you do, it's going to be just treated as a job. It's going to be treated as, this monotonous thing that you just go through life. But I mean, I loved playing. That round ball was my first love, and it was never about the money. It was never about the fame, the glory, nothing. It was purely because of the beautiful game. And that's ultimately what it's all about. Now, when you're a youth under five player playing on a rec versus playing at a professional level, it does somewhat become a job. There's a lot of things that you have to navigate. I think it's much easier when you're younger and there's not all this pressure and all these other things, social media world and the media world and the doubters and all of that. So it is a lot to navigate. But when you step in between those lines, and I always stepped in between those lines, it was like everything else around me just paused. It was like time stood still, and I'm just playing this game. And yeah, it was pretty amazing.
There's a Paul Graham line that I love. He's this entrepreneur. He writes these great essays about sort of entrepreneurship and creativity. And his line is that it's very hard to be great at something that you don't think about in the shower. Like if it's not something that you are profoundly obsessed with and consumed by, you are probably not going to be putting the resources in that's not just required, but that's going to allow you to compete with the majority of people in that field that are that way, right? For better or for worse. Like you're
Hmm.
competing with and against people who are totally obsessed and live and breathe that thing. And so if you don't have that, that is a huge competitive disadvantage.
100%. And I saw that and felt that firsthand from players that I played with, played against, all throughout my youth days, up into my college days. Some of those players, I used to look at them and say, "Wow, they're so much more talented than I am. They're so much better than I am." But I got to a point where none of them were playing past college. Some hadn't even gone to college to play, and suddenly, I remember kind of saying, what was it that I saw these players just all of a sudden stopping, and it's that will, it's that love. It is life consuming. For 17 years of my professional career, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, my life was consumed by soccer. And now stepping out of that world and being retired, I feel like I'm blessed to be able to be retired at the age of 39 last year, to still be able to do so many things. And now I feel like I have just such a better balance on life. I was all in, and needed to do what I did with my career. But now I just have this different perspective of, maybe not being as hardcore, and just kind of being in the present and just taking life in. So yeah, I don't know if that's just, getting older and not playing anymore, but I definitely have a shift in a mindset in this new retired phase.
I was with Dante Hightower, the football player, the other day. He just sort of retired, and I was talking to him about that. And I was like, "You got to find an outlet, man, because like I was like the intensity that you brought to this thing that you've been doing since you were 10 years old, right? Every day, it's what you're thinking about in the shower. It's what you're spending literally hours in the gym, on the field, watching film, and then also like your competitiveness and your satisfaction. That was all directed at this thing, and that thing is now gone, right? That energy cannot just be vomited on the people around you, who have gotten to know you over the years as being the person who had an outlet for those things, right? Like you have to find a productive, healthy place, I think, for that energy, or it turns on itself.
Yeah, no, that's what I heard. I heard a lot of um, stories about athletes in particular that have retired that haven't really transitioned well into that retirement phase, and I think it's interesting, and I'd almost like to, you know, dive deeper into it, because I was someone who was able to dictate when I left the sport. It was no career-ending injury, or I was too old, or it was a coach's decision. I said, I've done it all. I've got nothing left to prove. It's time for my next step in life, and that was that. And so to be able to peacefully walk away from something you've done your whole life, you talk about this outlet and this release. I don't really have those competitive, foaming at the mouth juices that I'm longing for anymore, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I play golf now with my husband, and I'm getting into that, and but it's almost like a peaceful journey. Like I'm just kind of, all right, it's going to take time to learn the swing, and I'm going to be patient with it, but I'm going to enjoy the process more because I don't know that I necessarily took in and enjoyed the process in my career. And again, maybe that was good, maybe that was bad. I reached heights that I wanted to reach, but it's just an interesting perspective to kind of compare the two.
See, like there's two different Ryans. There's the Ryan who's writing a book, and then there's the Ryan who has recently finished a book, right? And so like Ryan who is writing a book is like a dog that's getting walked, that's going outside and playing a lot, that's sort of very like, or like a kid that like had a full day, right? Like I had a productive, healthy, generative, like thing that I got a lot of that energy out. But then also, because I care about this thing so much, I don't care about a lot of other things that don't really matter. I'm just sort of like, I don't care what the weather is when I'm writing. I don't care what's happening in the
Right.
world. Like, I don't, I'm not noticing whether the house is messy or clean, because like I have like a kind of a tunnel vision that is my thing. And then sometimes my wife will catch me when I'm like between books, or I've just stopped a book, or I'm waiting for edits back on a book. Like suddenly I'm like, I'm up in everyone's business. I have a lot more, like now all of a sudden I'm looking for stuff that I would have been totally oblivious to before. And I think that is the beauty of having a kind of a life's task, like a thing that you do that fulfills you and challenges you and stimulates you. Being involved with the game, I think probably generally is that for you. But I think people struggle when either they don't have that thing. Like just imagine how frustrating it would be to be you having never discovered the thing you were meant to do. Like if you had walked
Hmm.
away from soccer after you got cut, like you would be the same person, but you would have never found that fulfillment and meaning and sense of self. So I think it's frustrating to never have it. And then it's also frustrating when the
Right.
way you're involved in it changes. You have to find a new way to adjust and calibrate, or else you're not pleasant to be around.
Yeah, and I would probably say throughout my career, I mean, with my husband, and I mean, talk about the tunnel vision, and your mood is a reflection of wins and losses, success and failure. And it tended to not be good when there was failure and, losses and all that. But yeah, I mean, you have to be all in. And I think that, I do. I look at the people around me, friends, family, and I couldn't imagine, not really going after a dream, right? You're just kind of cruising through life, and you go to college and you get a job, and then you're just kind of, you're just going about life. But yeah, I'm very fortunate to have been able to do something that I love for so long and follow that dream. And I think what I take most from everything is, again, the books, the lessons, the journey, and everything that I've learned in between that. That's what I treasure most, because I'm a better person. I'm a stronger person, and I don't think that you get that just kind of going through life as just like it's your job in a sense.
Yeah, and that's there's obviously the people who choose not to, and then the people who can't, right? Like I think all the time of the
Hmm.
Langston Hughes poem, "What Happens to a Dream Deferred." Do you know that one?
I don't.
Oh, it's so good. It's really short. I just pulled it up. He says, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Or maybe it just sags like a heavy load? Or does it explode?" And then so you think about the people who,
Oh.
because they didn't have the teachers or the coaches, or people because of the color of their skin, or what country they were born in, or the economic circumstances they were born in, that have this potential or this calling or this gift, but they never know it, or it's not even an option to explore it or make it real. Just how terrible a
Hmm.
fate that is, and how tragic that is for someone to like
I
not
know.
even have like a chance that they walked away from, but like to not even have a chance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I know that's why I'm so grateful and thankful. Um, but do you think those types of people realize that throughout life, or do you think that not knowing is kind of that unknown of not being fulfilled and realizing you haven't had that opportunity or chance?
There's probably different ways of knowing, right? There's like the I could have, I could have been somebody, I could have been a contender. There's like sort of that kind of like I didn't pursue
Mhm.
it or I didn't get it. Then there's like you were talking about people who have injuries who like they were great, and then a freak fall or an accident or violence done to them takes that away. But then yeah, there's probably a larger contingent that just sort of has lack of fulfillment or meaning, or some sense that like they were meant for something more, but because they were born in this impoverished area, or like, I mean, just think, I mean, how recently it even was possible to be a professional women's soccer player. Like, how many people just like, it
Mhm.
wasn't even a thing. Like, I'm sure there were generations of talented, athletic, ambitious women who it, it wasn't even a thing that they weren't thinking about. They were just, they were given a kind of tunnel vision about the kind of career options or life that they could or couldn't have. And there must have been kind of just a profound dissatisfaction or a sense that there was more to life that they couldn't fully realize because of just how things were.
Yeah. I mean, even speaking to my mom, I mean, she had said, soccer was never an option, never a choice for her to play. I mean, she was a cheerleader. There wasn't much, and then you have Title IX, that allowed women and more women's sports in college. So yeah, it is interesting. And then you look at, yeah, I think it was not a go. So it's interesting. But then you hear stories of, just incredible people who grow up with nothing and somehow find a way through that, which I think is incredible too. So um yeah, it's just life is definitely a journey.
Totally. Yeah, it's there are the people who persevere through things that they shouldn't have to persevere through. Um and then there are the people who, you know, maybe they were just 1 degree less determined, but that didn't mean they couldn't have been great had there been fewer barriers, less resistance, uh, a different path.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there's even, as I've talked to athletes, uh, I remember I was talking to Marty Bennett about this, who also played for the Patriots, but he's like, there was a very clear path for a big black dude like me to be a professional athlete. Like there was a whole system that encouraged people like me to go towards sports. But he's like, I also liked drawing and
Mm,
art. And there was not a system that said, how do we make you great at that? You know, that there that how
right.
many sort of sparks are there, and which sparks as a society do we, or green sprouts, whatever, how many of those do we make into something, and how many of those do we sort of, stamp out? Like there's the famous story about Malcolm X
Yeah.
is a young boy, and he said his teacher asked him what he wants to do, and she's like, he says he wants to be a lawyer, and she's like, she laughs at him, she's like, you must think of something more realistic. And I think there was a racial slur involved also, but the point is, like, he becomes a criminal instead, right? Like, because the thing
Yeah.
that he should have been encouraged to think about is humiliatingly slammed in his face.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same with kids too nowadays. I feel like I would never, yeah, you hear so many stories of professional athletes in particular, just because that's kind of the world that I'm in, where, their teachers have laughed at them when, hey, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to be a professional football player. I want to be a professional soccer player. And it is just interesting because from my perspective, I would be like, hey, yeah, dream big, go for it, shoot for the stars. So it is in someone's particular environment journey, what is said or done can literally have life-changing effects on them and what way they go in life.
This discussion lately about nepo babies, this one about like people whose like parents are actors or actresses, and then they become an actor and actress. Like a lot of the people that are like famous
Oh,
or important or good today, you know it's not so much a pulled up by their bootstraps thing, it's like their parents were in the industry, right? And so people are saying that's sort of
mm-hmm.
unfair, and there's advantage, and that's true. There's, football is super nepotistic, Hollywood super nepotistic, lots of professions are. But I've always thought, I think about this from a parenting standpoint, because I think about my own childhood. Like, nobody I knew was a writer. Nobody I knew. I don't think there's a single parent of any of my friends growing up that didn't have a salaried job. They were all like employees. I
Mm.
didn't know anyone that was like an entrepreneur or a creative or an artist or something. And so I've always wondered if part of the thing about what we call nepotism, like how does Steph Curry and his brother both make it to the NBA? The fact that their father was in the NBA, is that a biological advantage? Is that an advantage that he pulls strings for them? Or is it that they lived in a world where it was possible to be a professional athlete, and their dad was like, here's how you do it, it's not rocket science. Like, in the sense that, like, you
Yeah.
grow up not thinking that it's insane to make your living playing a game. right? And like my kids will have a
Mm-hmm.
different relationship with books and entrepreneurship and things that I do because they've been normalized like by them growing
Right.
up around a person who did it. And so I wonder how many people's options are closed off by the fact that the things that they want to do are just outside the experience or even the ability to conceive, like by teachers or what, like the teachers like, you can't become a professional athlete because they've never seen that before. It seems impossible. It's like you can't win the lottery,
Right.
you know.
Uh, no, yeah, no, it's interesting. I've had the same kind of chat with my husband about it. And you look at Tiger Woods and his son, and now in the Super Bowl with the Eagles and Chiefs, you've got the Kelsey brothers. Um, so I was talking to my husband about this. I was very athletic growing up. Um, my parents. I'm one of three. I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. And my husband Brian was very athletic, and we kind of go back and forth with one another. Like, was it, how much of that are you born a bit athletic, and then how much of that is your environment? Like, he was put in front of four wheelers, dirt bikes, wave runners, every sport imaginable. I wasn't put in front of those, action type sports and those riding sports, but swimming, softball, football, soccer. I mean, every sport. And my siblings, we grew up in the same household. My brother went on to play college soccer, and then that was it. And my sister played soccer for a little bit, but um, it's just very interesting, the dynamics of, because we talk about it all the time when we want to start a family, and we would want to give our kids the opportunity to just try everything, maybe more geared towards sports because we're sports people, but because I feel like that's the only way you truly can kind of find a passion and know what you may be good at or like.
Well, speaking of books, have you read David Epstein's book Range?
I have not.
I think you would really like it. He
No.
wrote a book called
Good.
He wrote a book called The Sports Gene, which several years ago, which is really good. But then Range is basically he's
Uh-huh.
contrasting Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. So like Tiger Woods is basically from 2 years old is told you're going to be a golfer, and is basically raised in a kind of science experiment to to do nothing but live and breathe, hitting a small white ball. Whereas like Roger Federer like plays a bunch of sports. He doesn't even really get serious about tennis until his like late teens. And he has a different relationship with, but
Mm.
they're both dominant, both, all-time greats. One has sort of more of a resilience and a flexibility and a lightness to him, and the other is like kind of imprisoned in this thing. And his point is that having a range of skills and interests and being exposed to different things, not just in art, or sorry, not just in sports, but in all things, is a better is a better way to be.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I know it is. It is. I didn't realize that. I'll have to. I just wrote that book down. But yeah, it is. It's very interesting. And then you kind of think of someone like Tiger, who, I mean, the greatest of all time. I mean, transformed the sport of golf, and then kind of hit those rocky patches. Was that because he was just too, one dimensional in that? Was there that feeling creeping in of wanting to experience other things? And there's a lot of athletes that, are athletic, that have played multiple sports. And it is kind of an interesting comparison to, you know, most of the greats do seem like they are a bit more dimensional than just that one sport. But then you've got the rare occasions that, you know,
He was drafted as a baseball player also, right? Like you can be so good and be
yeah,
good at multiple things, and like I also think
Mm,
there's probably an argument if you're really getting into it. It's like there's something wrong with a high school baseball player having to get Tommy John surgery. Do you know what I mean? Like that you've thrown so many
yeah,
pitches by the
yeah,
time you're 17 years old that you're wearing out your arm. Like what I love about what I do, and I think we talk about it less as a society, is like burnout, right? Like I love that writing you can be a writer, a professional writer up until the day that you die. Like you had an incredibly
hmm
long career and you're not even 40 and it's over. Like you just think about like how small the window is for some of these things, but is part of the reason that people get these repetitive injuries or it's so short is that they're thinking about it in such like a finite. They're not thinking about it, how can I, like they're thinking about how can I be great at insert thing now, not I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Attia's work. He's fascinating. He's this doctor. He's like you should think about what your life's going to be like at 90. Like you should make decisions like you're staying in the ring an extra year as a boxer, but if you're lucky enough to live to 75, what's your quality of life going to be based on the decision that you just made? Do you know what I mean? We don't think long term
Oh,
in a lot of the decisions we make.
mm-mm. No, not at all. And that's, a lot of athletes that I know, that I've played with, some of them need knee replacements. Some have already gotten them. So, my quality of life, I'm grateful that I'm able to still golf, hike, ski, do all of these things because that'd be a really crappy life to have played soccer for 34 years and then not be able to walk or do anything after that. But I am I think it's a high debate amongst youth sports now in general. We talk about the specialization, and I'm all for, if you want to be the best at something, you've got to put the time, and energy and hours into that. But I look back on my youth career and I, you know, I didn't get that burnout because I wasn't playing 4 or 5 soccer games on a weekend. It was one, maybe two max. So during that week, you look forward to that 1 or 2 games, and then you get back at it and practice. And I did some other sports as well, but you develop different muscle groups. And I really believe that it's every parent now seems to want to get their child into some sort of specialized training at the age of 4 because they think they're going to be the next biggest star. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that.
That's totally what the book is about. And like it's not just, hey, you could burn yourself out, you could get um different injuries, but it's also like you learn things being in these different situations, having these different experiences that ideally when you do ultimately specialize, and you're right, at some point you have to pick a lane, and you're like, because you can't be world class at like 7 things that you're half-heartedly
Mm,
pursuing. You have to pick your thing. But like the more experiences and environments that you have to draw on, the better you're going to be at that thing. Like if you've only studied physics, you know, um, when it comes time to communicate physics to people who don't know that much about physics, you're gonna not have the skills, right, or the words
hmm
to be able to communicate this thing to like regular human beings. So I think range is not just range, but also the sustainability we're talking about. I think like as we're talking, I don't know when this will run, but like Brady announced his retirement today. Like he's pretty good for a guy who's 45. Like you compare Brady's body to
Yeah.
Tiger Woods's body, that's a different approach to how one treats themselves. And one is probably going to be, I don't want to say happier because that's relative, but one is going to be a less pained 70-year-old than the other, I imagine.
hmm Oh, 100. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and it was big news for Brady this morning. I was kind of wondering about that. You know, I think, physically he could probably do it, right? And I look back at, kind of my retirement announcement. I just got to a point where the grind, I love the grind, but it is a full-time job, to constantly be all in, to constantly take care of yourself, around the clock. I was thinking about it, thinking about all the things that I need to get better at. It's, it mentally takes a toll. And obviously can't speak for Tom, in this particular moment, but it looked like it took more of a mental toll, obviously, some personal things going on. And it's hard, it's hard to stay at that level for so long and just, grind away every single day and give all of yourself to that. And because a lot of other things, suffer and you have to sacrifice. So yeah, it's not easy, but that's life. Everybody sacrifices and does, has to make choices throughout their life in different circumstances.
Well, you mentioned passion earlier. It's like you're not just competing with younger people, but you're also always competing with people who are hungrier, who have something to prove, who potentially want it more. Like it must be hard as you do more and more, as you have done more and more, like finding what is it inside yourself that's making you want it so badly. Do you know what I mean? Once you've done it, it's no longer, well, I'd like to do this before I stop. Well, okay, then you've done that. Like what's getting you out of bed? What's
Hmm.
putting you in the ice bath? What's putting you on the road again? Um, you have to find that thing inside yourself to motivate you because it's not external stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and just the expectation is hard, once people see something that you've done and they expect it every time over and over and over again. And you look at someone like Tom Brady, you would have loved to, I mean, first year he came to Tampa, he won a Super Bowl, which I don't know. I mean, I would have been like, all right, mic drop there, that was amazing. But everybody's different and there's always, more, but then you've reached that level and the expectation is just people want it every single time. And I think that's what gets hard. But yeah, it's, some incredible athletes that done it over and over and over again.
Well, for you, I'd be curious, like, okay, the discipline of like one more rep, one more burst of energy, one more drive, one more season, like that's a pretty simple kind of discipline, right? You're drawing deeper in yourself. Like, what do I have left to give? How much gas do I have left? Can I do it one more time? That requires a certain amount of discipline. But I imagine actually the more challenging discipline was for you to say like, all right, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm going to call it here. Like as you said, my decision as opposed to a coach's decision, and a doctor's decision, uh, a financial decision, or whatever. You had to have the discipline to know and then to act on your feeling that you had taken it as far as it should be taken.
Yeah, I think that, your ego can definitely get in the way. Who doesn't love a lifestyle of being in front of crowds and, being on social media and being highlighted and winning things and having success? I mean, but again, that wasn't why I did what I did for so long. I did what I did for so long and had the consistency and the discipline and the will and the love simply because I wanted to never put limits on myself and push myself as far as I could go. And the way that the soccer world works, which is, a little different than the NFL or the MLB or the NBA, we have cycles where every 4 years there's a World Cup and every 4 years there's an Olympics. So in my head, I envisioned my career originally only going 3 cycles, which would have put me at the 2016 Olympics to finish up. But when I got to the 2012 Olympics, I said to myself, I don't want to do one more cycle. I want to do two more cycles. So essentially that was four World Cups, four Olympics. So with 2020 happening and Tokyo getting pushed another year into 2021, I knew in my mind that was going to be it, because the next cycle that came around was this year, this 2023 Women's World Cup. Um, and then, again, you're getting into the, could you push more? It's more travel. Everybody's going to be talking about your age. They're going to want the old ones out and the new ones in. And it just was, for me, it was actually an easy decision. When we lost our hope of winning another gold medal at the Tokyo Olympics, we lost to Canada. Um, that then put us into the bronze medal game to compete for that medal against Australia. There's this picture of me sitting on a ball after that game, and in that moment, I knew that once this Olympics wrapped up, I was going to tell the people I needed to tell that I'm going to be retiring. And so it was kind of just, it was an easy, alone moment that I had, that I knew that I would never compete on the world stage again. And I would never get a third gold medal. I would have to settle for bronze. Um, and I was okay with that. I had felt like I had given it all that I had. We talk about that discipline. It got to the point where I gave so much of it from 2005 to 2021 that when I finished, I didn't have much in me. Like I was operating in my reserves, and was just fully at peace to turn that next page. And I'm grateful for that, because, like I said, I don't think a lot of athletes in particular get to enter that phase feeling that way. And there's a lot of factors. I had a falling out with my family for about 12 years, and they came back into my life in 2020. And um, again, I talk about kind of the timing and the things that the higher powers bring you, per se, and everything was just kind of wrapping up the way that it should have been. So it was almost like picture perfect, aside from not winning a gold medal and all that. It was yeah, it was an easy decision for me to make.
Well, you can come up with ways to not listen to that voice, though. Like, I think what you're talking about is self-awareness. Like, you had this sense, you had this notion, you'd come to this place. But if you're also one of those people that had turned yourself into a machine, let's say, to be able to do what it is that you do, it it can make it possible to sort of override that. That's why people, sort of go out for, one the bank robber, one more job, or
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna run for election one more time. Like, you, it's no knowing is one thing, and then um, sticking to it is probably another, because I imagine um, there were people who it was in their interest that you keep doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I imagine you make the
Hmm.
decision, and then you have to face, you know, all the things that entails, right? Like, there's um, agents and support crew and blah, like, there's the reality of it. It still probably wasn't easy, and then to sort of stick with that trust or that sense you had with yourself, that was probably took a certain amount of fortitude, I imagine.
Yeah, it's true. I never really kind of looked at it that way. I think because I had just come to peace with it all, and there was no real ego in my head telling me, like, oh, come on, chase one more. And I was talking to a friend the other day about this. You know, we're talking about somebody who, is working all the time right now. And it's like, if I can just get to this next stage at my job, I'm going to be making X amount. And at what point does that chasing ever stop? Like, do you then get to that point and say, oh, well, if I can just get to this point? And that's how I sort of felt in my career to a point. But I don't know, just, yeah, I think that, yeah, I guess I could have talked myself out of it and could have kept going. But yeah, just for me, that perfect timing of just going out on my own was my way of saying, this is how I want it.
And enough is such a powerful thing, right? Like having enough. And yet, to be great, particularly at sports, you have to be the kind of person that they're like Tiger. There's a fascinating biography about him, but his dad, who would put him through these like crazy, ordeals and sort of tortured him and put all this pressure on him. He would say like, I'll stop. You just have to say the magic word. And the magic word was enough. Like, I've had enough. Right. So it was like he basically made that word like a sign of weakness. Right. And there, it's like, hey, I've had enough criticism. I've had enough pain. I've had enough, all the things that you have to push through to be great. I've had enough rejection. I've had enough doubt. You have to push through that to be great. But then that makes it hard to be like, I have enough. Look at my wall of trophies. Look at my bank balance. Look at all the things I proved to myself. I have people that I love, all the other things. Like, it can be hard to be like, I have enough. I'm good. I'm satisfied.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I got to the stage at the end too where I felt like I had been trying to prove people wrong throughout my career, which, in a sense added some fuel to my motivation to then end with realizing I don't need to prove another thing to anybody else. And it was a very freeing feeling. And when I announced my retirement at the point that I did, I think it was in August, I had a couple of months to sort of go on this farewell tour with my teammates and play a couple more games with the national team, with my club team. And I think that's when, my teammates were really able to kind of see that mask off that I had on for so long, that I just never let anything penetrate. And I think that's sort of what I was looking forward to in this next chapter was to really be able to live life, to be able to do all the things that I couldn't. Um, I put soccer as number one forever, and it was all enough for me. And that essentially is the most freeing feeling, and now it's like I get fulfillment in other places.
Well, how much for you also, though, I imagine having, basically won all the great prizes of your profession, that must have been immensely satisfying and, rewarding and, validating. But you also left the game like a lot better than you found it, right? Like, not just the public profile of the game, but some of the stands you took and then the lawsuit that you filed. How much of that also allowed you to sort of go like, enough, because you were you, you were leaving the thing better than you found it, which to me is kind of the meaning of life, right? Is that we leave the place, people, the thing that we do, we leave it in, in better hands than we took it from.
Yeah, it was, I look back to the moment I came on the national team in 2005. I mentioned before where I only played 2 games that year. They had been renegotiating their collective bargaining agreement with US Soccer. And in there, they were asking for guaranteed salaries and health benefits and pregnancy leave and all of these things that I simply, had no idea about. I just played in 2 games, received 2 checks, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. But little did I know that they were fighting for the next generation to be set up, essentially leaving the sport better than when they came into it. And then, You fast forward to myself and my other teammates and kind of what we had to fight for. It just became necessary for us to then take that step, like the pioneers did, prior to me and several other players, um, knowing that these are the necessary steps we had to take to make the sport better. And yeah, it was really tough, challenging to be part of that, to be fighting with your employer, filing lawsuits with them, and then stepping out on the field and having to compete. But I think that we set the standard, and we gave the rest of the world, you know, female players, female soccer players, countries, teams, the confidence to know that they've got to fight, and they can now fight because look at the standard that we set. So yeah, it's incredible to have been part of that. And I think it's going to be evolutions of that, because there's still leaps and bounds that we can keep pushing and making it better.
Well, and I think it's also like at the end of one's career or life, you're not just going to, how are you going to measure whether you were successful or not? I probably as you go on, as you get further from it, the sort of quantifiable things probably matter to us less, and more the impact and the collective benefit of what we do manage matters more. Which, again, to go what we're talking about, are you valuing short-term things or long-term things? But then in the moment when we're faced with a choice, hey, do I want to speak up about this thing? Do I want to get involved in this thing? And then we go, but it'll hurt my prospects here or make me enemies here. We should try to zoom out and think about how we're going to think about it in a long time from now. And that should hopefully allow us to be a little bit more, I think, courageous and civic minded in what we do.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think yeah, the friendships, the camaraderie, the struggles, the all the things that you had to fight for. I mean, that's, people always ask me what's the best thing from your career, and I can't pick one. It's the whole complete package. It's everything in between, and the lessons, the journey, and just kind of, yeah, every person that was kind of put in my life, or within the team, good or bad, I'm able to extract something from them, and I think that's what's pretty cool, and to be able to kind of have that perspective, and I don't know that I necessarily would maybe have that, being younger, but I think the older you get, you just have a bit of a different perspective on life and situations.
No, I think that's right. And that's a beautiful spot to stop. So, Carli, thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Appreciate it.